Hello, this is Al Filreis here in Philadelphia, about 9 blocks from the Kelly Writers House. This is a program sponsored by the Kelly Writers House in Philadelphia, and we had long planned to have the wonderful friend and eminent poet Bob Perelman visit us from across the country, spend a couple days with us at his old haunts, and be part of a ModPo webcast and a poetry reading, this event, and an episode of Poem Talk. Well, things kind of happened the way they happened, and now we've got Bob coming from his home in Berkeley, right, Bob? You're in Berkeley.
Right, yeah.
And it's really great to have you. I want to spend just a minute or so introducing or really reintroducing Bob to the Writers House audience. We also have a wider audience of folks. And then Bob is going to read mostly from his new book, which is this, Jack and Jill in Troy. It's new from Roof, and you can get a copy, well, your local providers, or not local, your internet providers, but we prefer that you contact roofbooks.com and buy it directly from Roof or from SPD. It's also available on Amazon and elsewhere. It's a wonderful book. Before we get started, so Bob will do a reading of one poem that's not in that book, an older poem, and then about 25 minutes of poems from the new book, after which, or 35 rather, and after which Bob and I will we'll talk. There'll be a Q&A. Let me set that Q&A up. For those of you watching using the YouTube player, you're looking at YouTube, you will see a comment feed below YouTube, below the player, and you can put your comments there, comments or questions, even if you just want to say, damn, that was a good poem, but we would appreciate comments, or damn, that was a bad poem. We would appreciate your comments and questions, from which we will select a few to convey to Bob during the Q&A. And there's a second way. Some of you prefer not to log in to YouTube, and I believe comments are only restricted to those who are logged in. And if you prefer not to do that, I'm about to read out a phone number, and I believe my colleagues at the Writers House might flash that phone number up on the screen as well. And you can text to that number that I'm about to read out any questions or comments that you have, and we will select from those to convey to Bob. And that number is 856-687-3519. That's 856-687-3519. And we prefer, since we'll only get a phone number and a comment, we prefer that you give us a name. It can be a pseudonym, but it'd be good if it was at least a first name and maybe where you're calling from, so that we can convey those questions and comments. We're welcoming Bob back, putting that in quotes, to the Kelly Writers House. It's a great honor. Bob was one of the founders of the Kelly Writers House, and really, along with Bob Lucid and maybe Greg Janickian, the Writers House was his idea, what seems now to be a natural one. So we owe Bob a great debt. This was way back in the fall of 1995. Bob's spent many years at Penn as a member of the English department faculty, a great teacher and mentor of undergraduates and graduates. I'm imagining that many of his former students are joining us tonight, tuning in tonight, maybe have not seen Bob in a little bit. His books of critical prose include, among many, The Marginalization of Poetry, which made quite a splash, including the essay poem in couplets, the title poem, which is quite remarkable. Among his many books of poems are To the Reader, I'm just picking a few here, Face Value, my favorites, The Future of Memory, which may be my favorite of all time. What a book. In fact, the new book derives something of its style from The Future of Memory. I think we can talk about that. 10 to 1 selected poems, Iflife, and now Jack and Jill in Troy. It's a wonderful book. I just read it this weekend, and it's really, in some ways, Bob at his comic languagey best. So Bob, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome back to the Writers House. It's great to see you, and we look forward to the reading.
Well, thank you very much, Al. It's I want to say it's nice to be here, but it's nice to be talking to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's the here part of it, I mean, we're all getting a little tired of our bubbles, but that's how it is. Speaking of the situation now, the Jack and Jill in Troy it's written pre-pandemic, and I wanted to acknowledge where we are in the pandemic, and so I'm going to open the reading with it's an old poem. It's 30 years old now, but it is addressing a different plague back in the 80s and 90s. This must have been written around 1990. It's called Chronic Meanings. It's from 10 to 1. And it's an elegy for Leland Hickman, who was a fantastic editor of Temblor magazine in Los Angeles. And I actually, it's actually addressed to him. I mean, I sent it to him as I knew he was dying. And he put it in the last issue of his magazine. So in a way, it really is a poem of address to him. What it is a series of 5-word, basically truncated sentences. That's what I came up with as a way of addressing this situation to him, just to see what happens to meaning when it's cut short. So without saying more, I'll just read it now. It's about a 5-minute poem. Chronic Meanings. The single fact is matter. 5 words can say only. Black sky at night reasonably. I am the irrational residue. Blown up chain link fence. Next morning stronger than ever. Midnight, the pain is almost. The train seems practically expressive. A story familiar as a society has broken into bands. The 19th century was sure. Characters in the withering capital. The heroic figures straddled the clouds, enveloped the tallest, tens of thousands of drops. The monsters struggled with Milton. On our wedding night, the sorrow burned deeper than. Grimly, I pursued what violence, a trap, a catch, fans stand up, yelling their lights go off in houses. A fictional look, not quite to be able to talk. The coffee sounds intriguing, but she put her cards on what had been comfortable subjectivity, the lesson we can each, not enough time to thoroughly. Structure announces structure and takes. He caught his breath in. The vista disclosed no immediate. Alone with a pun in the clock face and the Rock of Ages, a modern. I think I had better. Now, this particular mall seemed. The bag of groceries had, whether a biographical junk heap or, in no sense do I. These fields make me feel Mount Rushmore in a sonnet. Some in the party tried. So it's not as if that always happened until one, she spread her arms and the sky, if anything, grew, which left a lot of, no one could help it. I ran farther than that wasn't a good one. Now put down your pencils. They won't pull that over. Standing up to the empire. Stop it, screaming in the smell of pine needles. Economics is not my strong. Until one of us reads, I took a breath, then the singular, heroic vision unilaterally voices, imitate the very words. Bed was one place where a personal life, a toaster, memorized experience can't be completely the impossibility of the simplest. So shut the fucking thing. Now I've gone and put, but that makes the world, the point I am trying, like a cartoon worm on a physical mouth without speech. If taken to an extreme, the phone is for someone, the next second it seemed, but did that really mean, yet Los Angeles is full? Naturally enough, I turn to some things are reversible. Some, you don't have that choice. I'm going to Joe's for, now I've heard everything. One time when I used the amount of dissatisfaction involved. The weather isn't all it's, you'd think people would have, or that they would invent, at least if the emotional, the presence of an illusion, symbiosis of home and prison, then having become superfluous, time one has to give to taste, the first and last. I remember the look in. It was the first time some gorgeous, swelling feeling that success which owes its fortune, come what may, it can't. There are a number of, but there is only one. That's why I want to okay, that is that poem. And now I'm going to turn to Jack and Jill and Troy, which has a lot of little retellings, bits of the Iliad, and some Jack and Jill nursery rhyme stuff, and some other things too. So it's quite a stew here. Anyway, I'm going to start with The Keep. Jack and Jill went up the hill to the windy keep of Troy. This was long before apnea set in and all our woe. The keep is where you keep things of value, cataloged carefully, no matter whose they used to be, which eventually makes for provenance problems up and down the hill, big ones, little itches dogging you into every enclave, nagging like a summer cold when you're not young, when someone's got what's yours, has it, up on the windy keep, up whatever, the thought roots and won't be budged. That certain someone is getting decimated, him and all his glittering connections. A short poem, Folk Wisdom. The mind, they say, is like a clit or supernatural fingertip, a sensitivity far beyond the spurious permanence of names. And the best thing, or at least the best thing so far, is that this unavoidable sensitivity leaves everything up in the air for the newcomers, the not yet speaking, the infants. And this is takes a little scene from the Iliad and retells it. Sometimes when I was dealing with this Homeric stuff, I felt like I was, it's like the old fashioned reel-to-reel tape recorders where you could pull the tape through faster. And sometimes I felt like I was kind of speeding up Homer, double speed or triple speed or something like that, telling it much faster, but it's the same set of happenings, but just much quicker. Anyway, Aphrodite and Helen. It's private what we're talking about, but everybody sees it. The dictionary meaning of the next word is aroused, but don't you think in context, angry makes better sense? Instantly, Helen knew the goddess's neck, her whole being, through the disguise of the old woman, faithful wool carder, the one she loved most back in Sparta. But this was someone quite different. And Helen cut through the disguise, raising her voice to Aphrodite. Look, I tell you, it enrages me. Each time you get total access to everything I ever felt. You dandle that thin chain hanging from nowhere all the way down to nursing. And then you get to shove me back into the fucking bedroom. And there's the airhead lover fondling his armor, always the same grin each time he sees me. And this is a non-Iliad poem. It's called All-Purpose Disaster Poem. And I guess I'll say one or two things about it. There's one repeated line that you'll hear with a swear word in it that I took from Charles Bernstein. But the poem itself I took from a prompt from our colleague, Emily Steiner, who had a bunch of us in the department write poems based on a little bit from Beowulf. And the little bit from Beowulf is about a moment when two clans celebrating a wedding get iced in over the winter, and one clan member murders another. So they're stuck together in this simmering state of antagonism, but they can't do anything about it. And that just struck me as it describes so many political social situations where we're stuck with our half enemies. All-purpose disaster poem. It's your fucking fault that it's like this. Hand me the remote, would you? Do you need another? I'm having one. It wasn't ever like this, and now it's always like this, and it's your fucking fault. Before, nobody imagined anything like this, but now nobody can think of anything else, and it's your, let's just leave it. But we can't just leave it, and that's your fucking fault. Not that I'm blaming you. There was nothing you could do, really. The friend of my enemy's BFF, who just happens to be the boss's lapdog, and one fine day some drone just happens to blow him to shreds. And there's really nothing anyone could have done or have not done. And so who's to know? And that it's that random is your fucking fault. Hand me the remote, would you? When did the guy say he'd be here? 2 hours ago. Right. And he's bringing what? Coors? Coors Light? Honestly, fuck you. I would never. You're saying I ordered Coors Light. You can't be serious. Give me the remote. Madman's on. Remember when they tried to cancel the 60s? They're always trying to cancel the 60s. The 60s are dead, deader than psychedelic rock. And whose fault is that? Whose fault is it that nature pisses off my white identified neighbor? Think, because it didn't just happen, that it'll never snow enough to cool down my being pissed off, and that's your fucking fault. Of course I walked around in my red corduroy bell-bottoms, wherever I wanted to go, and I'm sure you walked around wherever you wanted to go, in your red corduroy bell-bottoms. Why not? It wasn't as if there weren't enough red corduroy bell-bottoms to go around. You're missing the point. The point is we lost the 60s and all the revolutionary potential. And the specific point is it's your fucking fault. It could have been anyone, which goes without saying. Population is a fact of life. Evolution is a fact, a great number of facts. There are more people than either of us has time for. Fact, outer space exists. Fact, fish are disappearing and the seas are rising. Not quite on cue, but we all get the idea. Giant parking lots destroy manners. It's not really a question. Patriarchy sucks the pleasures out of life at an unreplenishable rate. We agree. Every drop goes without saying. Sue me for breathing, or let's just shut up and wait for our fucking Coors Light. But can we at least agree that it didn't have to happen? But it did. It could have been anyone, but it was you. Where's the remote? So there's that rant that came out of my, once I got that scene in my head, I just, that whole thing just came out. Anyway, okay, here is a poem called Love Scene. To never know what you're going to say, and then to always end up saying basically the same thing. Doesn't that get seriously old, Jack? I love it when you call me that. What? Jack. But Jack's your name, Jill said, letting her bucket smack on top of the well water, pretending you don't know your name. Isn't that the same problem of compulsive improvisation we were just talking about, remember? Touché, Jack confessed. Toujours touché. Isn't that why we came up here? Touché, said Jill. I don't have a sword, and if it comes to that, neither do you. Bigger than big. Zeus savors the smoke of perfectly spiced barbecue. And when the really nice wine spills on the proper surface, that's also a thing he greatly enjoys. He's way up there, but the scent arrives full-bodied. Like they say, just because you're already on high, no reason not to get a little high. Sensory bliss, snort it. And here's a retelling a story from the Iliad. This is called the beguilement of Zeus. Hera and Zeus are temporarily on opposite sides of the Trojan War, and Hera is trying to distract Zeus from his machinations. Hera and Zeus at home. At this point, Hera thought just how to get what she wanted. She'd aim all his pleasure right back at the father, brother, husband. She'd knock him off his vantage. His wishes were hateful to her. She'd wreck his plan. So she armored up with oils and other irresistibles. She'd already got hold of the love bead and went up the mountain and presented herself like some ingenue, first time in town, micro-fidgeting, hyper-compliant. As for him, never had he felt so alive, so on top of his game. Not when he played badminton with Daphne, solitaire with Lydia, catch the drift with Sue, let's make a deal with Ray, post office with Dawn, rolled that perfect game with Sally. This was like the first time, even better. It was right before the first time, which was finally going to happen. The cues worked to perfection. The ground literally grew flowers beneath them. The atmosphere candied into a golden fog, so no one outside could really see all that much of anything. Sleep crept out from the branches. Victory was hers, candy from a baby. Then afterwards, when things are a mess, his entire schedule's shot, the beeper won't shut up, that's precisely when she gets to tell him, look, it was just sex. I swear on our marriage bed, don't start. The young know all this. They've been hearing it since forever, but they also know that if you've missed the latest, nothing you know is worth much. That's why screens are sacred and why it's almost physically impossible to look away. Miss something, you're screwed. Between walls. Down here, when the gods do appear, they're in control. And if situations arise, they've got special effects to make the winning and losing pivot according to the plan, which everyone knows, though it's hard to keep track of all that's happening between the various walls in the contested spaces outside. But everyone already knows how it all turns out. The lofty walled town with the famous keep and the endless scandals burned to the ground, all that foreign noise, but real parenting skills. Dense mats of local know-how burned to ash. The unpredictable entirety of all that intermeshed information long escaped as smoke. And us, meanwhile, listening to the plan unfolding, the serious back and forth. We almost lose, but of course, because it's in our language, we count ourselves among the victors. Even with the insinuating buzz of strangeness, what we hear is ours. But when you get to the end and the city's not yet gone, it's hard to be sure it was them and not us because what is happening makes it hard to credit that there ever was a plan, hard to believe it's not going to be us losing access to everything we know. Fourth time's the charm. Can't you see the world is burning? The dream asks. Ha ha, there is no light in dreams. Then doesn't the taste of the charred intelligence of the entire species coat your tongue, offending everything it starts to say or wants to taste? The dream asks. Ha ha, you don't taste in dreams. But the mourners wailing and yelling, the dream laps at the sleeper's ear. Don't these work through your mind's strongest walls? Ha ha, in dreams the ear is so warm and shut. But aren't you at least a little bit scared, a little terrified that some of these things, or newer, worse things, will happen to you and everyone you know? The dream insinuates. And I couldn't agree more, says the sleeper. Look how tight I'm squeezing my pillow. Okay, this is another non-Iliad, non-Jack and Jill poem. It was written for Emma Bernstein's yahrzeit ceremony a year after her death. It's in 7 parts. It's called At Emma's Grave, 7 short parts. At Emma's Grave. They say the mind can keep sense alive about 7 seconds, and that we can register at most 7 things: coins, pebbles, apples, or 6, 5, almost nothing. 2, maybe that's why we invented the present as a place to live, to keep the things we do know so exactly, keep them exactly, keep everything, keep what we know near, at hand, alive in our minds. Emma. 3, it's hard to remember what the light looked like then, what it was saying in such detail. Hard to count the blackbirds in that pie, the extra special one, 4 and 20, they said, but we only see the released flock, the single flying mass, each one the first and only birth. 4, such a small set of seconds to put everything in, since not everything is here that we love, which makes it impossible not to want the small set to have been utterly different, the flock to have swooped right, not left, to have landed in any other tree. 5, not the look of the light, clear, vertical, soft, childlike, or whatever our 7 seconds say, but how fast we've already seen what is here and what is not. That's what makes the 7 seconds so hard. 6, what we see makes us not remember what it looked like just a second ago. Now all different, with us at a loss, with that stone there. 7, it is our privilege alone to disappear, to never forget that we do, never forget to set down what must be set down, so that it not be forgotten, not be lost in all this time. Emma. This it's called Once is Never, Twice is Always. There's a phrase in Homeric studies, hapax legomenon. Hapax equals once, legomenon equals said. A hapax legomenon is a word we only see that once. So how do we know what it means? How do we know it's even a word? Like in bird watching, if there's only that one-time bird, how do you know it's a distinct species? How do you know that one-time word is a word at all and not some transmission glitch? Still, these hapaxes, these once-only words, continue to exist, huddled in with all the other epic noises, lines, speeches, counter-speeches people would hear, learn, repeat, know, which is how we can still read this now stable, huge set of words. The Iliad structured school days for centuries. The massed particulars kept more or less in place amid passing successions of heads, each touch specific to its moment, but easy to transfer somewhere else. So 600 years later, Augustus, just turned emperor, in fact, newly deified, had only to quote the line where Hector is lecturing Paris about how truly stupid his Paris's sex life was for his Augustus's displeasure at daughter Julia's public gyrations to travel down the generations to us, for his tailored sigh over his daughter's tedious transgressions to go viral. But back to hapaxes, which are the opposite of viral. Take booyah, which I first heard Stuart Scott use on TV. Praise punctuating 3-pointers. Heroic accuracy, booyah, like Marines expelling air from toned, well-armed bellies, ready to defend wherever this now is. Booyah, you got a problem with that? But what about 1,000 years later, when there's only that one lonely hapax booyah on some tattered page? What is it then? Boast, incantation, fuck you, ineradicable ululation? Acknowledgement. Some of these words have appeared in the following places: my mind, tongue, ear, and files, and in the minds, tongues, ears, and files of loved ones, friends, acquaintances, the wide world I've heard and not heard, flyers on the sidewalk, billboards lit and peeling, oceanic screens and private polling places. Any other mouth, the ideal location to hear these words, transing, flaunting, sniffing, standing at attention, beaten into twitchy sameness, moodily bowing to the monotonies of the convinced lash. The bodies of these words, stretched out, seemingly endless, but animated, like the green hills lining the freeways in New Jersey or Indiana, half-mile hills, 30 feet high, you glide by, and out the windshield, suddenly there's the dull stub of a small smokestack, a little gray tube stuck in the middle of this next elongated green lump. And then not long after, another one slides behind, each tube expressing its own signature output of the slowly cooking plastic and fatigued newsprint secreted beneath the undulating green hills, off-gassing the invisible news, our sacred intoxicant. The plot thickens. 1. Jack and Jill may well have gone up the hill, but there are many hills, many with their tops removed for all to see, leaving nothing to the imagination. Hills are the closest things you see from the air. 2. Don't act surprised. Don't act surprised, but torture and terror were just here, chained together, pretending they didn't know each other. They were never shy gods, but here it was like they were trying to blend in with the debris, taking advantage of the spectacle of the couple climbing the hill. 3. Since generosity always makes for the cleanest way out, then of course, let us wish Jack and Jill the fullest employment of their subjectivities. But aren't happy endings just asking for it? Okay, and I'm gonna, let's see here. I'm gonna read, I'm gonna read 3 more. I'm just, oh yeah, okay. ABCs. There was no need for an Iliad, and there was not enough time to hear the whole thing. But once it existed, or began existing, once the big set of moments, interlocked scenes, arguments, continuity paced, words hammered into shiny rhythmic clumps, short sobering lessons, reproducible tableau, the cast of all-powerful gods, but of course totally human, except all-powerful, which goes without saying. Once all this began happening, and then, though the record skips, nevertheless the precision is audible and needs to be kept going from mouth to ear to mind to hand, and tracking back with revisions and elisions and everyone's faulty memories, weak links everywhere. The library burns, the equipment obsolescent the minute you take it out of the box. Plus, people are stressed by the ridiculous overbooking, but still the whole poem gets said and resaid, eventually into long-term memory, which is why so long after we've each been weaned into our one-of-a-kind need-to-know outposts, why we still speak in formulas. Be that as it may, eventually one fine day, we finally get to the end of book 4, where the serious killing begins. A kills B, and then as A's friend C goes to seize B's armor, D kills C. General fighting over C's body. And here now is mighty E killing F, crushing him in gruesome detail. And this death prompts G to throw his spear straight at F, but instead of F, it's, my glasses, I'm confusing E and F. And here now is mighty E killing F, crushing him in gruesome detail. And this death prompts G to throw his spear straight at E, but instead of E, it's H, who's instantly shorn of light. Its insistent pleasures chopped off, the dependable uploads gone just like that, the huge downloads so automatic, all that change with that one slash stopped for H, who still had so much to think about. And this enrages mighty I, the legitimately famous I, who then, bulging with mania, kills J, of all people, that fun-loving nobody, born like us in the midst of the alphabet. Okay, now just two more. Glass half full, glass half full. They say Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water without a thought in the world of who might be up there already, involved as they were with each other's detail. To fetch a pail of water, that's the empty bucket swinging, which they're probably taking turns carrying, passing it back and forth, shy at the moment of transfer. When arousal begins, some faculties sharpen while others are dampened, to repeat what everyone knows. But none of our senses will be reliable guides for what they say happened next. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Hardly what you'd call a triumphal second act. Breaking your crown never helps. Rivulets of trauma blotching down the hill, and nothing's going to work the same anymore. But what about Jill tumbling after? Not to mention what about Jill tumbling after? No mention in her case of any head trauma, and doesn't tumbling suggest she's something of an acrobat with the ability to accommodate to upside down situations? And doesn't that hold out hope that we can develop portable scales for weighing unlike things? And the last one is a short one. It's called Tact in Troy. And this, there's some poems I didn't read, but that where Troy is kind of there's a suggestion that it's kind of like New York, cosmopolitan, full of all sorts of different foreign, cosmopolitan mix of people. Anyway, Tact in Troy. In the early 21st century, we're still finding out about our miraculous powers amid this jumbled crowd of hulking buildings, ton upon ton of exquisitely priced brick, chrome spun almost too fine to see, the entire weight of this exacting knowledge, so easy for our miracle bombs to blow up, which everyone knows, but has presents to get and other friendly things to do, because we like each other as much as ever. Okay. That's the reading.
Thank you, Bob. That was wonderful. We're going to put either a blush on your cheeks or a smile on your face. There's a lot of friends, and many people have been watching this reading so far. I'm going to tell you some of the friends. You'll be amazed. It makes me think that this kind of reading, other than the, as distinct from the reading we would have had at the Writers' House in Philadelphia, where so many of these people couldn't have attended, there they are. Susan Howe, Herman Beavers, Ron Silliman, Fanny Howe, James Sherry, Rachel Blau Duplessis, Steve Benson, Kevin Platt, Charles Alexander, Kathy Lou Schultz, Pam Brown from Australia, Alan Bernheimer, Alan Golding, Jake Marmer, Dee Morris, Amy Paith, and a lot of other people. Can you
Oh,
believe that?
well, thank you very much.
It's very
folks.
exciting. What I'd like to do is ask you some questions that I've been thinking about as I've been encountering this book, and also to convey a couple of questions from some of these people who've been listening.
Okay.
First, I would ask you to turn to a poem called The Thing About Rhymes.
Oh, yeah.
Would you? It's page 36.
Okay.
Would you read that? And then I want to ask you about the metapoetic quality of this poem and the relationship between.
This is a poem it's two poems with the same name, right? It's on.
Yes, there are two poems. I'm thinking of the first one of that name.
I have to read it both because that's the whole.
Okay.
All of this thing. Okay.
Read both, but I have a question about
this is the one poem printed on 2 pages in 2 different sets of words, but it's the one poem.
Okay.
The thing about rhymes is they always repeat. It's always up the hill and always tumbling after and always the same stopping place. But stopping places only last so long. And like the immortal gods, once nursery chalk loses contact with the living streams of human rememoration, once that varnish gets on you, it's curtains. The thing about rhymes is that they keep happening the same way. So you can see up turn to down, and you know you can set it up again and follow it down again and say again the second it's over to start it back up again, because the change is going to happen this time too.
The story of Jack and Jill appears in so many variations. This is one of them that really intrigues me because you're saying something about rhyme and going up the hill. We never really understand what Jack and Jill are doing going up the hill. So tell us a little bit about the opening of that first one. The thing about rhymes is they always repeat. It's always up the hill and always tumbling after. Tell us what's rhymey about the up the hill and tumbling after.
Well, every time you say Jack and Jill went up the hill, each time that poem is the same. So this double poem comes out of grandparenting, and I'm actually even quoting.
Doesn't the Jack and Jill all come out of grandparenting?
Yes, it does.
Focus on it. Yeah.
This one quotes Bertie, the granddaughter Bertie, who was 3 at the time, and she used to say with great vehemence, not about Jack and Jill, which actually I never read Jack and Jill to her, but whatever it is you did, she would say again, do it again.
Right.
So anyway.
Jack and Jill keep going up that hill. And tell us about rhyme and that hill. It's the same. It's the grandfather reading the same story again and again.
Right. I mean, that's how I took it. And then the first poem where things stop and all of a sudden varnish comes on and language ossifies and dies, and then it's curtains and it's the end. And then at the second half, you could just somehow turn things over again and they'll start again. So it's a weird kind of happy ending.
Now, speaking of rhymes sounding like things, sounding like themselves, there's a book called Sounds Like.
Oh, yeah.
It's also metapoetic. I wonder if you would read it, and I really want to ask about the end of that one.
Okay.
Your way of thinking about sound.
I'm glad to talk about the end because, I'll read it and then, here's how I'll read it. Sounds like. On top of the hill, it's green, the Wi-Fi is spotless. There we first hear of Jack and Jill, and of different ways sounds end. If Jack, you thunk the trunk down, drive up and down the block, back and forth across the earth if need be, or simply under orders. But you can't say Jill through to the end without first stopping your tongue behind your teeth, then releasing to let the L out, which lets whoever's listening finally know how it rhymed with hill all along. But if you think sound is going to tell you what's what, you have another think coming. So I wrote this, at first I was just describing the end of the K of Jack, the end of Jack, and the end of Jill, sort of like it. And then I thought, this is so intolerably essentialist. This is a terrible poem. And
Jack and Jill, not your poem, but Jack and Jill.
No, the first 2/3 of this poem or whatever, that it could be accused of G.I. Joe, Jack, and and lyrical Jill, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how, that's, and I got very worried about this. And so at the end, I just sort of say, but if you think sound is going to tell you what's what, you have another think coming.
So you're addressing yourself
I'm
there.
addressing myself, and I'm saying how I'm using the word think twice. And the first time it's a verb, and the second time it's a noun. And that language, yes, it's sound, but it's also all the stuff behind sound in the structure of language.
Bob, I've been with pleasure reading your poetry for a long time, and those who have done that have the great experience of seeing things come back again and again, concerns, and I would say worries, like not just concerns as in issues, but worries.
Yeah.
Worries. And one of your worries constantly through your career has been, to use a phrase in one of the poems in this book, that words are for losers.
Is that it from this book?
Yes. It's a,
oh yeah, that one.
But it's also a lifelong or career-long worry, which goes back to your first theoretical thinking. It's called In the King's Bed, page 44. It refers
what page
to
is that?
44.
Okay.
It refers to winged words, and then a line, words are for losers. I want you to comment on that unironically, if you can.
Okay, I'll try. This one is this is a tiny little poem, and I'm ventriloquizing this one character in the Iliad, Agamemnon, who's a sort of a bad ruler, very greedy and sadistic. And so this is that king speaking. So in the king's bed, I love a perfect apricot, a special thing from the spread of my resources, just for you, taste. They used to say things like winged words and the fence of your teeth right down your throat and many other things. But words are for losers. Taste it. So this is, I would not like to be in bed with Agamemnon. This is somebody, the perfect apricot is also, the possessed woman, etc. And anyway, it's a very mean poem. It's very mean.
That distinction has been comic all along. Here, certainly it is.
But which distinction? Sorry, which distinction?
Words are for losers. Taste. Stop talking and drive. We're going to crash this car. Drive.
Right.
All right. But there is, even in that Creeley poem, there is a concern, a worry about being just a word person, a language person.
Doesn't that poem begin? How does it begin? Something, John, I said, which is not his name, because I'm always talking. Isn't that because I'm always talking?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's you. That's the poet, right?
Yeah.
So it's, All right. I want to convey a question that came in from James Sherry.
Okay.
About the poem, The Armor Swap. And the Armor Swap is back on, it's toward the beginning. It's the second poem. It's on page 12. Let me convey what James is asking.
Okay.
The Armor Swap raises questions of affiliation and politics. What does Bob think about how the Iliad treats ideology, politics, family ties compared to today? So you're laughing because it sounds like a very serious question. About
it's not. I'm laughing because it's such a big question.
It's a big one, but you can handle it.
Okay.
And anyway, didn't James publish the book?
Yes, he did.
So I guess he's entitled to a serious answer.
Yeah, he is. So what's the question again? What is?
Well, so
I want a hand.
It raises questions of affiliation in politics, right? So what does Bob think about how the Iliad treats ideology, politics, family ties compared to today? I mean, you are not just using the Iliad as a historical document, although
no, I'm not. I'm what.
And I might follow up, Bob, by allowing you to connect the Iliad to Jack and Jill, because you bring them together a lot.
Right. Well, I don't. I want to sort of pass on ideology because it's either too complicated or it would take too long, and I don't have a good crisp answer about that.
Right.
But the way I brought the Iliad into the present, and I try to bring Jack and Jill into the present, I'm very struck by how my Iliad is something of an anti-war poem and almost a feminist poem, or it certainly is a critique of warrior masculinity, I suppose.
Right.
The airhead lover fondling his armor, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what I found so intriguing is the balance of such a large poem, the Iliad, how it is the Hellenic national poem, and it brings all the Greek people together, and the Greeks are the winners. They win the battles, etc. And Troy is going to fall. But the poem, by the second half of the poem, the human beings, the women who have any kind of agency are all in Troy, and Troy is a kind of complex, cosmopolitan, rickety coalition that is not going to survive. But and we know it's going to fall, but it doesn't actually fall in the poem, and that kind of strikes me the way we are now. We know our whole civilization is very rickety and cobbled together with impossibly weak rivets, but here we are living in it. And so I guess that's how that's the big way I'm trying to apply the Iliad to our current situation. The Jack and Jill, the Iliad is, women are very interesting, odd, problematic creatures in that poem, because the goddesses are often, are very powerful, etc. But women are also possessions in the Iliad, and that's what drives the plot. Is Agamemnon steals, Paris abducts Helen, and Agamemnon takes Achilles' prize away from him, etc. And that's what causes all of the fighting. And Jack and Jill is a kind of a more innocent utopian playground for where you don't have that kind of gender inequality, I suppose. Mm-hmm. So it's not a very there's no narrative outcome in it. I mean, they're constantly kind of elbowing each other aside, these two parts of the book. Yeah. But I did want to put them together. I did say one thing. Susan Stewart long ago asked me, why Jack and Jill and Troy? And I said, well, there's a hill in each one, and Troy is up on the hill and Jack and Jill go up the hill. That's a very, that's not, that isn't a thoughtful answer, but in a way it is something of an answer.
I love it. Can we return to the Emma poem and look at section 6, which is on page 58? Okay. And I want to ask you about memory. Section 6 seems to me, in relation to memory, the most complicated. And I thought if we focused on that section,
okay,
we might do a close reading of it.
Okay.
Do you mind rereading it?
I'll be fine. What we see makes us not remember what it looked like just a second ago. Now all different, with us at a loss, with that stone there. I'm trying to do a couple of things that one set of moments does completely replace another in terms of the senses. And so we can't call things back, but at the same time, this is speaking to this great sadness, but you're looking at the grave of a loved one, and they're not there now, and now it's all different, and we're at a loss. But there's the stone, which is, not changing. So there's the senses change.
Do you mean the stone of commemoration?
Yeah. But it could be any stone. It could be, just with a stone on the ground, but it's an unresponsive objectivity that doesn't comfort our subject.
So there's a language theory of loss in here, and that's not making too much of it. We are at a loss, which uses the idiom to
Mhm.
shift the loss to us away from Emma being the lost.
Yeah, yeah.
At a loss,
I actually never
and
thought of that, but yes, you're right.
right? Well, you certainly do stuff with idioms all the time. And then
Yeah,
with, so you've got with us at a loss. So that's one kind of with.
right,
And then the other with is with that stone there, which is colloquial, that stone there. The
right.
there is the hardness. That's the there of Oakland, right?
Uh-huh. Right,
And
right.
this is
And
all
then but with,
actually, this is all the there of Oakland.
huh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
But the not remembering, so you're doing something very counterintuitive and Perlmanian here.
well,
There's,
we can't, I mean, I suppose I could have been more exact, but we can't, you just can't run the tape backwards and see the cloud 2 minutes ago. It just, you can't, memory, I mean, the senses, the sensoriness of the present um, is not subject to memory.
yeah. Chronic meanings operates with the same tension. You're trying to discover how disruption is a present. Disruption is still with us, even though Lee is gone or will be gone. And the disruption has to be the responsibility of the poem formally, poetically, is to convey that disruption as if disruption goes on. And that's what you're trying to do with Emma's memory, I think. Does that make any sense?
Um, I guess I was, I don't know what I was trying to do. It was, um, in a way, it was too hard a subject for me to fully wrap my mind around, and I just kind of waded in because I had been, there was a mistake in my hearing. Charles had asked me to read something at the graveside, and I thought he had said to write something. So I thought I had to write a poem instead of just pick a poem. Anyway, so I had to write this poem, I thought, and I had just, what came to mind was it's somewhere in William James about the mind can only see, you can only grasp seven things. You can only count to seven or something like that. So I just started writing these 7-line stanzas and did 7 of them, and kind of
Wow.
reverse engineered it in a way. I mean, that's how much space I had, and I somehow wanted to say everything I
Well,
could
you
say.
also, in the psychopathology of everyday life, that mishearing, you also did the usual reversal of reading and writing.
Yeah, that's right.
Alan Golding asks, what is the relationship of number to elegy for you? I mean, Alan is so right here. When you turn to loss and death, often there's a numbering. Number
Yeah.
is important, and also lettering the alphabet, but let's stick with numbers. What's your answer to Alan?
Well, how that 4 and 20 comes in there. The blackbirds that get released, and then somehow that would stand for the fullness of life somehow. That so many, so 24 hours, a full day, something like that.
But also in chronic meanings, the fives.
Oh yeah, right.
You're very adamant about the fives as a constraint, but the fives are also the stresses in pentameter.
I guess I wasn't thinking of. What happened with chronic meanings? I mean, I had this idea of cutting things, and it turns out that for me anyway, that 5 words was just enough to get something kind of interesting and complicated, almost novelistic going. 6 words, it's too easy to finish a whole sentence. 4 words is not quite enough. So 5 in a way was just kind of a happy medium for starting to get complicated.
Yeah. Can we turn to the poem Options? It's a listy poem. It's not like the others.
Oh, yeah.
Page 52. Would you read that and we can talk about it for a second?
Okay. And speaking of numbers here, I deliberately screw up the numbers. For
Yes.
those obsessive people
You do.
who might want to count. Options. For local change, press 7. For nature, press 3. For cultural commons, press 8. If you've had it, press 5. For confirmation, press 1. For de-traumatization, press 6. For disambiguation, press 1. To change everything but keep your body the same, press 4. To change everything, press 2.
So how did you screw up the numbering?
There's 2 1s. I mean, this is dumb joke. I like dumb jokes. It's a dumb joke. For disambiguation, press 1, but I already pressed 1 for confirmation. So there's one, it's like quantum mechanics. Is one disambiguation or ambiguation? Anyway.
And
what number did I leave out? What number did I leave out? I don't know.
I don't know. But options, the title is purely ironic. Is it to any degree not?
Well, it's there. Let's see. Is there anything that isn't ironic about this film? Well, it's very ironic. First of all, I have to grant that. And it's like, are our options only, button pressing, and do we think we're going to do anything by it? This is almost like responding to a phone prompt,
Right.
Do we think that that's the only action we have? And I guess, where I got, for me anyway, serious is to change everything but keep your body the same, press 4. And that, I guess, is my kind of critique of a kind of my own, perhaps overly simple utopianism of like, yeah, let's change everything, but I want to be the same as I am.
Right.
And then so 2, to change everything, that's a little bit like, are you going to blow up the world? Is that, to change everything?
Yeah.
So
Rob Stanton has a question about all-purpose disaster poem.
Okay.
This is what Rob says. Great reading. All-purpose disaster poem had me thinking of all the pleasures and dangers of assigning blame. Can you say something more about address and accusation in this work? Well, actually, Rob says in poetry and your poetry, but I guess I want to ask about this book, this new work. Blame, accusation, address.
Yeah. I just was so struck by that. It's funny. I mean, Emily Steiner assigned this portion of Beowulf that tells the story of this murder at the wedding party, and they get iced in. And it was about 60 lines long or something like that. And I got so enraptured by the opening, it just struck me that it was, it spoke so much to today and to so many situations that I never actually read the poem. So I don't know what actually happened, but I know that, so and I didn't care about any kind of historical accuracy there. So I don't know. I just, again, it was a very intuitive there. And once I started, and I sort of felt, I just channeled that voice. I must have it in my head, the sort of the blaming voice. And it was like I've never done whitewater rafting, but it's what I imagine whitewater rafting is. That it's a very strong, turbulent current, and you're just trying to see how long you can keep going in it. And that voice tries to be a little bit conciliatory and tries to be almost sociable. I mean, he does offer a beer to the companion, etc. But I wasn't outside the poem so I don't really know what's happening. I can't say, well, here's the message I crafted and here's how I crafted it in the poem. Instead, it was like, I threw myself into this current of feeling and wrote it out.
Mm. Yeah.
I wrote it out. I RODE it out. I wrote it out, sort of.
Right. Right.
So I don't know if that doesn't really answer it.
Well, that's okay. You're entitled to answer things, slanted. Jake Marmer, by the way, says all-purpose disaster poem. Need that on a T-shirt. I want to ask you about two more poems, Bob.
Okay.
One is Waking Dream, which uses a figuration.
That one.
Standard way back in your work. Certainly the Future of Memory does this, but not only. You play with rolling things back to the beginning so that so that an after is kind of a before. In this case, that little trope of yours is when typos are reunited with their words while proper spellings, etc. I just love that little concept. I wonder if you could read the poem and talk about those. What happens in a world where typos are united with their words?
Okay. Waking Dream. The day the book of judgment gets taken down and read aloud, that's the day typos will be united with their words, while proper spellings will be wandering the hot streets, shouting their sins.
That's a revolutionary poem. What's in that paradise for language?
I don't know. This is I can't. This is this is the end of the world, the book of judgment, and there's somewhere this was triggered by. I'm very intrigued, just intellectually, by the Iliad. It was produced orally, but it's now a text, etc. So there's the written verbal. But so the book of judgment is a book, but it gets read aloud, and that reading aloud is produces the end of the world. And that day, and I don't know what I was thinking of, where this came from, but language is going to be turned inside out, I guess. And the specificity of exact word will be blown open, and so
proper spellings will be exiled.
Yeah, they will. They're the sinners. They will be. They're the sort of the. I've never read the Bible, I have to confess, but I think isn't that sort of
like what?
Sodom and Gomorrah? I mean, there's the hot streets. Isn't that a kind of maybe it's the apocalypse. Maybe it's the apocalypse that there's somehow wandering the hot streets strikes me as a kind of maybe it's Dante, damned, some sort of damned condition.
Yeah, it does sound Dantesque that proper spellings would be made to shout their sins on the hot streets. Bob, I asked you this afternoon, but I want you to please read Home from the Oracle.
Okay. Which on the next.
I want to ask you about you call yourself out a little humorously that you will have to write patriarchal poetry. It's just the way it's going to be. There's something funny about that. And then you go right to Jack and Jill again. So you're slipping in your concern about Jack. You're ultimately a Jack, I guess.
Jack and Jill is I suppose they're, it's definitely a bi-gender poem, and the Iliad is also a bi-gender poem. So I guess that's true. Anyway, I'll read it. Home from the Oracle. And Home from the Oracle, it's like, okay, you've gone to the sacred source, and somehow this is the message you get. Home from the Oracle. After all these years, like Stein, to my surprise, I still have to write patriarchal poetry. Jack and Jill went up the hill, which is where they took a pill, and which is where they took turns, as if time was on everyone's side.
So that's a wonderful poem, Bob. Tell us about why it's a surprise that this is like Stein.
Because this book is not very Steinian. And so some of these things, I mean, I just have to, I'm sorry I'm pulling the unconscious poet card here.
Yes.
I just wrote this. And
it's not something you do typically, though.
Well, when it sounds good, I keep it. So, and then I kind of move my mind around to.
Well, you're not going to evade calling yourself out to say you still have to write patriarchal poetry, as funny as that is. So it's fair for me
And
to.
Stein did write patriarchal poetry.
I
She wrote
understand.
this long work called Patriarchal Poetry.
After all these years, like Stein, to my surprise, we set aside to my surprise, and grammatically it's like Stein, I have to write patriarchal poetry, Jack and Jill went up the hill. Is that an example?
I guess it is.
Bob, that is an amazing poem. What I would like to do is ask those who are who've been chatting in the YouTube chat space to just type out some goodbyes or huzzahs or convey some messages, which I will read and pass along to Bob. And while I'm waiting for those guys to do that, they haven't started doing it yet. Please say something. This is a way of a sort of textual applause. While they're doing that, I will thank Nick, Anthony, Rachel, Heidi, and Zach, who have taken care of this session technically, and we really appreciate what they're doing. The gang is not complying. They're not typing.
They don't write on command. They only write when they're inspired.
Yeah, no, they've written a whole lot of stuff. It's starting to come. Yeah, Kevin Platt, Bob, we miss you and love you. James Sherry, emojis of thanks for the great event. Amy Pace, thanks, Bob. This made my day. It did for me as well, Bob. While some more of those are coming, I'm holding up the book, Jack and Jill and Troy, roofbooks.com. Max Keisler, huzzah, thank you for your words, Bob. Tony Simon, thanks. Ron Silman, give our love to Francie and Susan. Thanks, Bob, this was great. And it was indeed great. So, there's more coming. And Ruben and Max, Ron adds. Kim Harrison of ModPro, thank you so much. Wonderful way to end an Images day. Charles Bernstein, bye from Charles and Susan. Happy New Year to all. Someone named Ice Cold Vodka 2, which is my next stage. Tony G writes, many thanks. It was a great reading. Mary Stevenson, thank you. Rob Stanton, wonderful event. Amy again, goodbye. Thanks also to you, Al. Okay, I'll take Nada Gordon, hi, bye. Steve Benson, writing on demand. Keep identifying the patriarchal.
That's right, Steve. That's a better answer than I gave.
That's so Steve. That's great. And Kim Harrison asks, and James Sherry can answer, anyone know the best place to buy the book in Canada? D. Morris, Bob, love this hill. It's been a thrill. Never mind the pill. This is great. Bob, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for doing this. And snaps from me. Good night to all. We're going to exit, and you and I will see each other tomorrow.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
When is it tomorrow?
I'll email you.
Okay.
All right. Good night, Bob. Thank you again.